I'm sick of all your girlfriends say yes to all your adorable proposals. Do any of you have a good no story? I totally have one about my dad. Many years ago Steve was at the beach with his girlfriend, Julie, of about 2 months, and one of those planes with a banner out the back flew past with the message, "Julie, will you marry me, Steve?" Julie apparently freaked out and ran off, while my dad was trying to explain that it wasn't his doing. He had no idea. He thought it was his friend's idea of a joke when he walked down the beach and met a very happy couple called Julie and Steve. TLDR. My dad got rejected for a proposal he didn't make. Wow, that's some pretty bad luck. My mom is a horse carriage driver and has a lot of people propose while on rides. One night a couple took the company's most romantic ride. The guy turns to the girl mid-ride and asks her to marry him. She screams, "I already told you no before," jumps out of the moving carriage and runs away down the road. I heard the Benny Hill theme song when I read this one. Oh god, yes. And guess where this douchebag proposed? Another couple's wedding. Rather, at the wedding party. He got down on one knee. Everybody sitting at his table, along with his then GF, had a complete and utter look of "don't freaking do it" on their faces when he proposed. She got up and walked away, face as red as a tomato, and the guy chases after her screaming at the top of his lungs, "Don't we love each other? I got you a ring, babe. Frick this then. Frick you be," and then he comes back to the table. Most awkward wedding party of my life. One of my professors proposed to his girlfriend of 7 years after his PhD graduation ceremony. She said no and walked away, never to be heard from again. After telling this to our class, he got really sad and walked out. I bought a ring back in 2003. I was in the army, and she lived back home. I only got to see her on 3-day weekends, 4-day weekends, passes and leave. That being said, we still had on average about 2 months out of the year we got to spend together. So this ring was awesome. Platinum with a solitaire. I drove up to surprise her, and before I even had the chance to propose, she said, "We have to talk." She dumped me, and all I could think to say was, "That's okay, because the jeweler will take the ring back." Then I went to a high school friend's house and had a LAN party while drinking vodka and Wawa lemonade. I displayed the ring prominently on top of my computer. When I got back to my base, I went to the jeweler and returned it. Then I took the cash and bought a new computer. In retrospect, that computer brought me more happiness than she did. At my aunt's 50th birthday party, which also happened to be New Year's Eve, there were about 100 people there. She managed a hotel, so they were using one of the banquet rooms, and the party was in full swing. Out of nowhere, this drunk guy goes up to the DJ and orders him to turn off the music because he has an announcement. The DJ seems confused, but no one else comes to his rescue, so he turns the music off and passes this guy the mic. Most of the crowd seems pretty confused, as the guy's unknown to most of us, but my female cousin, let's call her Michelle, starts to walk up towards the stage, pleading for him to come down. He has something that he needs to get off his chest though, and soon he's in the middle of a teary-eyed drunken rant about how he's always loved Michelle, how he'd do anything for her, and after all that they've been through together, he just really wants to take the next step and make it official by publicly declaring his undying love. And next thing you know, he's on one knee, and he has a ring out and everything. Michelle's in tears now, and she's just shaking her head back and forth, still pleading for him to come down off the stage. He refuses to come down until she gives him an answer though. After an incredibly uncomfortable 30 seconds or so, the impasse comes to an end with Michelle fleeing the banquet hall with one of her girlfriends. The guy seems genuinely shocked and drunkenly trips on his way down the stairs as he tries to follow her. He completely wipes out, skidding across the dance floor on his chest, the half-empty beer in his hand flying out in front of him. Next thing you know, he's being escorted off the premises. Apparently him and Michelle had never even dated. He was a casual acquaintance and co-worker at the pub where Michelle worked. It was all completely surreal. TLDR. Drunken stranger proposes to my cousin in front of 100 friends and family members. Gets shut down, then faceplants when he tries to follow her. I once saw a guy get shut down in a really fancy restaurant. She got up and left. He stayed and finished his steak. Anyone who stared at him for more than 2 seconds He said, "What the frick are you staring at? Most awkward restaurant experience of my life." Yep, I saw the guy get shot down at the beach. She left crying and he just collapsed and laid there in the sand until the tide almost washed him away. He got up and started yelling, throwing the ring in the ocean. Me and my drinking buddy spent the rest of the afternoon looking for the ring with snorkels we bought from the gas station. So this is super classy. I was at Walmart at 2 in the morning. I was in college and 2 AM always seemed to be the best time to go. Hardly anyone there, no lines. The shelves are being restocked, and all the crazies come out. I was just finishing my shopping and heading to the checkout counter. I hear an employee get on the loudspeaker. He sounded amused and a bit confused as he says this is a message for woman's name, a man's name. Would like to ask if he can take your hand in marriage or something along those lines. As I'm checking out, I see a woman in tears running to the customer service section. I can vaguely hear the man shouting, "So is that a yes baby?" All heck breaks loose. There is so much screaming and yelling. As the lady finishes checking me out, I see a few employees run to the service center. The shouts get louder and I hear crashing, like someone is just throwing whatever they can get their hands on. I pay and leave quickly. When I get all my bags into the car and sit down, I see a security guard, 3 employees, a man and a woman. The man had a bloody nose. TLDR. You'll receive bodily harm if you propose to your girlfriend at Walmart. This is my new favorite post, by a dang mile. Not my story, but a friend of mine once said yes to her boyfriend, who had proposed to her at a carnival in front of a lot of people. When they got into the car to drive home, she told him she didn't really want to marry him. She just wanted to spare him the embarrassment of getting turned down in front of all those people. He stopped the car and made her get out. She walked home alone and they never spoke again. Fun stuff. Not mine, but a friend. He proposed. She said yes. A week later, she moved out, but she still wanted to be with him. A few months after that, she moved to another city for a job, but never mysteriously started said job. A few weeks after her move, she broke the engagement off over the phone, saying she just wasn't ready. They had been dating, living together, had pets together, for 8.5 years. It's not an immediate no story, it's a bit more drawn out, but it's still rough. If you're interested, the girl moved even further away and started dating someone almost immediately. They're getting married in October. It's weird someone would just kind of move in little increments like that. Maybe she was a chess piece. My best friend went to Kettering, former GMI, and his 4th semester started dating a girl from his class. She seemed good for him from what he said, but I was not very fond of her. Very spoiled rich girl type that constantly belittled everyone. Now my best friend comes from a blue collar family, both parents in factory work, that lived in a rough neighborhood. He tells me after they were together for 9 months I want to propose. Being the negative Nancy I am, I suggested waiting as they were only together for a short time. He ignores me and buys a ring and plans to ask her to marry him the next year. Well, he picks out the 4th of July weekend as he is going to her house for her parents' large party. Her parents throw a large party at their place on the lake and he works up the courage to propose in front of 500 plus guests at this party. He taps his glass, gets on one knee, and asks her. She, as he later described, lets out a long deep laugh, looks at him and says, "Yeah right," sarcastically. "You're great, but I'd never waste my life with you." The parents were laughing so hard they were in tears, and most of the other guests were chuckling as well. He decided to leave early and she stopped him. She told him, "It's not that I don't love you, but you're not good enough for me. We can date, but that's all I think I want from you." My friend gave her a long speech full of go to heck you entitled B stuff, then left humiliated, but he told me oddly liberated. She constantly tried to get back together with him and stalked him on Facebook for quite a while. Last I heard from him, she was upset that she is still single and that he was engaged to another girl. She had the nerve to write him a letter asking to be invited to his wedding. TLDR. Friend dates a rich bee in college, proposes at her family's lavish 4th of July party, gets turned down because he is from blue collar family, not good enough, and winds up happily ever after. My 4-year-old son said a girl at his daycare was his GF and he wanted to ask her to marry him on Valentine's. So I got him a little toy puppy and candies. Gotta support my little man. When I picked him up he came back with the toy and the candy and I asked what happened. She doesn't go here anymore. I talked to the daycare. Apparently the girl was in foster care and due to something in her case she had been removed from the daycare a few days before. Not a complete proposal, but close enough. I was in Europe for a month last year with my girlfriend and we stopped in Paris toward the end of our trip, which was amazing up to this point. Anyway, one night we're on the second highest platform of the Eiffel Tower and we see not one but two proposals happen right in front of us. Both said yes. So when we're both gazing out at the Paris skyline I get close and ask her, "What would you do if I proposed right now?" She replied less than half jokingly, "I jump. Whatever. One day she will be mine." Oh yes. I had been dating this guy for 3 months at university. Things were going really well. I, however, had just gotten out of a long-term relationship a few months prior and wasn't really thinking about the future. Not to mention, we had not been dating very long. After class one night we were walking through the streets of Detroit. We found this beautiful little place with all these trees, and oddly, no homeless people. The conversation was great. The night was beautiful. It was perfect. He asked me to sit under a tree. Sounded good to me. I was tired. He stammered out something about loving me. I told him I loved him too. And then, "Will you marry me?" I laughed at him. I thought he was kidding. He shrugged it off and the incident was forgotten about. 3 years later when he tried it again I found out he was serious that evening. We've been together for 7 years, married 4. I still feel horrible. Doesn't matter, got married. Last year I had the pleasure of attending my cousin's wedding. The reception was long and fun filled with many different types of assorted drinks as my cousin had a thing for exotic alcohol. Long story short, after a few hours and many empty bottles, many guests were extremely hammered. Something that seemed to be foreshadowed from the beginning. One of these extremely drunk men steals a microphone from the DJ stage and begins to express his love for the new bride. He spends a few minutes attempting to convince her to leave her new husband to be with him instead, throwing in a few insults to the groom until a few men persuade him to leave. This drunken man ended up being my other cousin, the groom's brother. Best I've heard was a guy inviting his old high school friend over. They hadn't talked in years. He proposed to her and she thought he was kidding. He broke down crying and then admitted that he was gay and just really wanted to be married because he was going to a Christian college and everyone was starting to suspect. Nice save. The romantic in me loves the adorable stories and the sadistic cynic in me is entertained by the horror stories of woe. This thread pleases me. I was shopping at EB Games with some friends when one of them decided to ask the girl at the counter on a date in the most awkward way imaginable. When he paid for his game he handed her a piece of paper as well that had his email address on it. "You want this?" he asked. She tried to be polite. "No thanks. I don't have a computer." "Oh, how about my phone number?" "I don't have a phone." "Well, maybe we could see a movie sometime if I'm blind." I said no to my ex-boyfriend. It was private so it wasn't totally embarrassing for the guy, but it was still uncomfortable. We were actually in the midst of a breakup, one that I initiated because he was a manipulative son of a b and just dumb. Well, we were driving somewhere and he had given me his grandmother's antique wedding ring. He says we should get married, and I ask him how marriage is going to make this relationship work when it's already failing. He states definitively that marriage will solve all our problems, that we'll be happy. I laughed and then I cried. It was just his way of trying to keep me from leaving. Man, that's not a proposal, that's a Hail Mary. My high school history teacher was in France with his then girlfriend, on vacation. We're Canadian, so that's a pretty far hike. She apparently loved the famous painting of the water lilies, Monet, so he found this little place near a French castle with a lake covered in water lilies. They sat on a little bench and he gave her a long letter describing how he felt about her and why he loved her so much. Then when she looked up from the letter, he was already down on one knee with the ring, asking her to marry him. Our class thought it was just the cutest proposal story ever, and then she said no. Not because she was an evil bee or anything, but because they both still had a few years of university left, masters and whatnot, and she didn't want to get married before finishing school, but also didn't want to be engaged that long. When he proposed a few years later at Niagara Falls, she said yes. You can say no without being an evil bee. My father proposed to my mother on their first date. From what I hear, it went roughly like this. K, you're fantastic. Marry me? Nope. Fair enough. How about dinner Thursday? Sounds good. This went on for over a year. Every date. Without fail. Marriage? No way. I figured. Movie this weekend? That'll work. After something like a year and a half, she said yes. Dad was so used to the pattern, he'd actually suggested dinner at his place before he realized what she said. I've been reading these and wincing, but this took me off guard. It is absurdly cute. A guy friend of mine was dating this girl who told him that she did not like public proposals and she would say no to one on principle. He did it anyway, in a fancy restaurant, and got the waiters and half the other patrons involved. She smiled nicely, leaned in, and whispered, I told you I'd say no to any public proposal, so you already know the answer. But if you want you can act like I just said yes and I will play along until we leave. I thought it was very classy of her to be willing to help him save face like that. When he recounted the story I did the best I could to follow her classy example and refrain from smacking him upside the head like I wanted to do. Guys, if your girl is awesome enough to be direct and honest with you, listen. A guy I'd been seeing for 2 months asked me to marry him. I laughed. Then I realized he was serious. There was no going back from that. I had a guy propose constantly, like every week, from the time of our first date until 2 months later when we broke up. He was clearly looking for desperation. When I was in first grade, the girl who sat behind me, as in our backs were to each other separated by a narrow aisle, had the same last name as me. Being the non-confrontational gentleman that I am, I figured I'd ask her to marry me because she wouldn't have to change her last name. It was the smoothest moment of my life as I leaned back in my chair, balancing it on the 2 back legs. So my head popped in from behind her right hand side and just flat out asked her to marry me. She of course said no and my 6-year-old heart was broken. For about a second, I then flopped the chair back forward and continued on with my phonics book. See, this sort of thing is why my boyfriend and I have a plan. When I want him to propose, I'll bring home a 2-foot diameter cookie cake. Then he'll choose the time and method of proposing, knowing that I'll say yes. It's foolproof, and it means we get to eat a crap ton of cookie cake too. Hon, I brought you some cookie cake. I'll get the measuring tape. So, here is my rejection story. I broke up with my high school sweetheart my senior year of high school. I felt like our lives were going in different directions, etc etc. 4 years later, he contacted me out of the blue, and we start talking pretty regularly, just friendly. He lived on the East Coast now, I lived on the West Coast. After a few weeks of texting fairly regularly, he invites me to come out to his graduation. I say I'll think about it. The next day, my mom calls and tells me he had called her to ask for help picking out an engagement ring for me. I call him, and he says I think we should get back together. I reply I think we should stop talking to each other. So, he didn't actually get around to proposing, because I cut him off at the gate. Yes, my ex-boyfriend was going to propose to me at his graduation, and we weren't even dating. We actually had not seen each other since the breakup 4 years prior. Nipping that crap in the bud. So a woman I know has been dating this man for 2 years very seriously. She is in love and wants to get married, and has been waiting for a proposal. Doesn't happen and she, the assertive woman she is, decides to take matters into her own hands, and buys a ring to propose to him with. She makes reservations at a nice restaurant and arranges to have a corner seat where she can snuggle up next to her boyfriend. Women apparently don't get down on one knee. About 45 minutes into the date, she grabs him around one arm, kisses him on the forehead, tells him she loves him and wants to be with him forever, and then pulls out a ring. He subsequently becomes nervously sick to his stomach and runs to the bathroom to puke and doesn't return. She is distraught, but when she gets home she calls him. He answers and apologizes for his behavior. She, being the romantic she is, doesn't want to ask over the phone for an answer, so she asks if he will get dinner the next night at the same restaurant. He agrees. The next night comes and he fully expects it happen again. She asks him if he had thought about last night. He immediately gets nervous. She asks if he has an answer. He runs to the bathroom and doesn't return. At this point, she is convinced he wants to say yes but is just too nervous. She calls again and schedules a date 2 days later. She meets him there and as soon as he sits down, he says yes. They proceeded to get married and 30 years here I am writing about my assertive mother and nervous father. Glad it worked out though. PS. It is all hearsay from them though. I suspect there might be some embellishment, but the core is most likely true. I know a couple who lived together for 10 years, and the woman got tired of waiting for a proposal to happen. So she sent an engagement announcement to the local paper and started wearing her grandmother's engagement ring around, without consulting him first. My boyfriend and I planned a marriage without ever proposing to each other. So every day for the 6 months leading up to the wedding, one of us would drop to our knees and propose, and the other would say number in public, at restaurants, at home in front of friends, wherever. We were married that July, and are on our 10th year together. Maybe for our anniversary, I'll take him around town and we can shoot each other down, for old time's sake. This is strangely adorable. My wife didn't say yes right away. I believe her first words were, when I proposed via a custom-made Trivial Pursuit card in the middle of a game. Are you freaking kidding me? When I was in high school, the next door neighbor of my best friend at the time told her that he was going to propose to me at Christmas. He was planning on buying a dozen roses and a ring. She told me about this and I said it must be a joke. She gave him the information, at which point he wrote me a note, asking me to think about it. I said absolutely not. I had never been alone in the same room with him, and had only spoken with him briefly when he was outside at the same time as me and his neighbor, my friend. He was 19 when I was 15. Positively creeptastic. When I was 3 years old, the neighbor boy, also 3 years old, asked me to marry him. Being the practical girl that I am, I told him I'd think about it. 20 minutes later, when I went to his house to tell him yes, I found out that he'd already gotten married to the girl across the street. I was heartbroken until a couple years later when I found out she was rather abusive and liked to slap him around. My boyfriend asked if I would consider marrying him. I said that we had some issues to work out before that. While I love him dearly, at that point, he had been unemployed for 8 months, back when the economy was still quite good, and had 5 unpaid speeding tickets within 1 year. 5 years later, he has completely turned his life around. He's got a solid profession. He's one of the most responsible people I know. He strives to improve in his chosen field. We're still together. The kicker is that he now does not want to marry me, and doesn't remember proposing that we get married in the first place. TLDR. If I liked it, then I should have put a ring on it. I got the best one. I knew a guy who couldn't get over his ex. So bad that he didn't even think of her as his ex. She had moved on and already had a new boyfriend and he wouldn't leave her alone. Then one day at the food court of the local mall he approached her, in front of everybody, with a guitar and starting singing. But the song was just simple strumming and "Will you marry me" over and over again as the lyrics. Plus he started the serenade like on the other side of the food court. So at first nobody knew what the heck was happening. Anyway, so he gets near her and she realizes that this retarded voice she keeps hearing is this dude, her needy ex-boyfriend. But before she can get up or act embarrassed, her new boyfriend, who was buying food, just drops his whole tray of crap and rushes at the guy with the guitar and sucker punches him, then takes the guitar away from him and starts hitting him with it, all the while screaming, "Bro, I'm sick of you, you're too freaking awkward," and stomping on his nuts in front of the Playpen daycare center next to the hot dog on the stick restaurant. As a spectator I can say the experience was super surreal. Oh, and if you guys have been paying attention and are wondering, she did end up saying no. I really think the best part about this is how he's not beating the ex up for hitting on his GF or continually approaching her, but because he's too freaking awkward. Before I was born, one of my parents' friends decided to propose to their girlfriend at my mother's birthday party, which is already uncool. He proposed at the table, and the girl yells, "I already told you." No one walks out. Party kinda ended after that. I once went to a hypnotist show. This guy was hypnotized to propose to his GF, with GF consent. She said yes after he gives a very honest speech of their relationship, but later he wakes up and forgets the proposal. Upon leaving the show I see her buying a recording of the show, and a few weeks later her and the BF come into my shoe store and I ask about it. BF goes beet red and the girl laughs her butt off. They are not married but very much in love. In kindergarten I asked a girl named Angie to marry me, but she said no because I'm a girl. Then she married Brian that afternoon. A guy proposed to a boy in kindergarten. He said yes. Umpteen years later we're still engaged, I suppose. I posted this a while back in another thread. I was out with my girlfriend and one of her friends. Her friend distracted her while I got up on the roof of the building. They were standing near a large window when out of the sky, I rappelled down the side of the building and in front of said large window. When she saw me, I knelt down on the windowsill, somewhat tricky, and popped the ring box. She cried, shook her head no, then ran down the hall. So there I was, dangling 60 feet up, with a broken heart. She left you hanging, bro. I saw the guy propose in a restaurant. They were there before us and had dessert on the table when he did it. When she said no, he got up and said fine, then you pay for dinner, and walked out. She sat there and ate her ice cream with a smile on her face. Then she took his slice of cake home in a box. She didn't seem all that upset about it. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.